to discuss several broad themes of improvement and issues that we can work together collaboratively on in South Asia. So for developing countries such as Bangladesh, for example, large investments are required for climate change, for digital innovation, to close infrastructure gaps and expand opportunities for the women and the marginalized. So a collective approach, especially amongst the poorly connected countries in the region, can also significantly enhance the the supply chain resilience and security. So that's also an issue we will touch on. And we will also talk about how we can develop international technology standards to protect a free and open internet, safeguard user privacy, and bring more people into Asia's thriving economies. So I will now refer to my colleagues to discuss what policies and methods that should be undertaken by nations like us, not alone, but in collaboration with other regional countries who we can both, learn collaboratively from. And how do we deal with the challenges that are currently disproportionately affecting the poor and most vulnerable? So I will go to Anwarul Haq first. Anwar Bhai, so South Asia, as we just spoke about, is one of the most vulnerable regions to the impacts of climate change and natural disasters. And while we have done brilliantly in terms of our human development indicators, also in terms of adaptation and partly mitigation to climate change, Bangladesh is one of the leaders in disaster risk reduction and in leading the climate negotiations. But post-COVID, there is a renewed push towards trade and openness and towards promoting a more digital and green recovery. Where do you think are the bottlenecks in the region, and how can we collaboratively work across the region to push these agendas forward?
Thank you, Maliha. I think you have already put very crucial questions actually in relation to South Asia. We all know that 1.8 billion people are living here, and 75% of them are somehow climate vulnerable. Also, in the last 10 years, if you see the countries that are facing the worst form of weather events, actually, out of 10 countries in the whole world, 4 are from the South Asia. So we all know how important it is to discuss around climate resilience work, why it is important here. Now, with that, actually, I would see that the first bottleneck for South Asia is that the lack of investment in climate resilience as a theme, actually. So we must remember that according to Asian Development Bank, 9% of the GDP loss will happen till 2000, means 21,000. That's coming. So if mitigation and adaptation measures are not taken, then that would be a real challenge for us. But what are we seeing, including Bangladesh? There are a lot of discussions happening, a lot of analysis has happened. So we have National Adaptation Plan, we have Delta Plan, we have Moody Prosperity Plan, all are there. Now, all policy documents are basically emphasizing that there is a big need for investment. But in relation to the next step, there are struggles happening. Now, that's where probably we need to think about different options now. So, what kind of innovative financing can we put here for the region? It's not about one country, but can region think about a pot of funding considering innovative financing, alternative financing, blended financing? All these are terms. Now, this needs to be now translated into actions. I think that's not there. And until and unless climate financing is thought seriously, and it should be a top priority actually. So is this happening? Means when we sit with the finance division, do they use that lens? Probably in most of the countries in South Asia, answer would be yes or no. And yes, but there are struggles around that. So that's where politicians, bureaucrats, and climate specialists all needs to come together and really think around that. So in South Asia, it is important because climate is also interlinked with, I would say, three areas. One is agriculture, because agriculture is still in South Asia is very important. So, and agriculture is very vulnerable to climate change events. So it's quite correlated actually. So we need to think about, okay, what can be done around that. Infrastructure in general. So it's not climate resilient yet. And also the coastal region, the belt that we have, the discussion around blue economy. That's another area where we need to find out a way to really invest. The second thing, again, if you see that it's related to the green energy transition, whatever way you want to say, but South Asia is heavily relying upon fossil fuels. Means as per statistics, actually, the region accounted for 34% of global coal consumption. So you can understand, means the discussion that are happening around transitioning towards cleaner energy it's very crucial, and we need to really think around that. Bangladesh itself has made a stride here. There is an ambition that 40% of its energy will come from renewables by 2041. Now, it cannot be done alone, we know. Means if you consider Bangladesh, with the amount of land we have, with the opportunities that we have, we will struggle with green energy. So what is the solution? The solution could be actually really think about if Nepal has surplus energy, green energy, can this be transmitted to Bangladesh or Bhutan? So we need a regional framework around energy management, energy transition too. So it comes out there again and again. The other thing is that, last thing around that is that we need to really focus on human-centered approach here. So we need to think about rights-based approach here. So the whole the climate change discussion that are happening, so that nexus between human rights, climate change, all needs to be thought about actually. So these are the areas where a regional framework could be developed and then actions can be taken forward.
Thank you, Anwar Bhai. Related to that, how can we continue to strengthen the region's social protection systems to improve coverage and enhance protection of the poor and vulnerable from the future shocks? And what other countries can Bangladesh actually learn from? Or what are the good practices that you would refer to that we could adapt, especially kind of in the impending, photo that we already created on climate change and the impacts that we'll face?
Yeah. So social protection, again, that description that I have given. So there are vulnerabilities. So, and there will be requirement for social assistance for these vulnerable people. Now, means the discussion that comes again and again in South Asia now is thinking about the traditional social protection system may not be enough. So what is required is that social protection, climate change related vulnerabilities, so climate change and also the health, all these needs to be coming together actually, and we need to think about shock responsive social protection as a way forward here. So, and that means actually, for example, Bangladesh is quite good in responding to disasters. We all know that. Now, time has come to really think about, it's not about disaster response actually. So time has come about anticipatory action. So means we need to really understand the vulnerable people's condition, need to really anticipate, means there are science and data now. So means science can tell us actually whether the flood is happening, what kind of severity is happening. But are these countries ready to really think about, okay, rather than supporting a person after flood, can the families be supported even before the disaster happens, so that different preparation can be done and loss can be minimized actually. So those kind of discussion needs to be there. So I would say that shock responsive systems needs to be enhanced here. There are some good examples in Bangladesh. So there are some experimentation happened in the Shirajganj belt, how to do weather forecasting and that based insurance system. So there are various options around that. So those can be really explored. The second thing is that again South Asia, if you see, the coverage of social protection is still low. I think less than 1/3 of the population, if I could remember it correctly, presently under the coverage of social protection in the countries. Now, this needs to change, because if you compare with the other part of the world, the coverage is much bigger, and we need to really think about universal coverage. We need to make sure that all vulnerable populations, including those are in informal sector. So that is another struggle that is happening in the South Asia, that the economy is not only formal, there are also big economy happening in informal, and these informal sector workers are not covered by any social protection scheme. So when there is a crisis happen, there are challenges around that too. So that needs to be thought about. The impact of pandemic is still like recovery is happening. Please remember that an estimated amount of people who went back to extreme poverty is 134 million. So the recovery has not been done yet. So investment needs to be there. Technology. So there are good examples actually how technology can be used in social protection. So for example, in Bangladesh we have good example that government to people payment system known as G2P. It's working. So how to make sure that there are challenges around targeting the right beneficiaries. Again, South Asia, all countries there are struggle. So because it's related to political economy and various other factors actually who are included. So patron-client relationship, there are various other challenges around that. But technology can also provide solutions around that. I mean, if countries like Bangladesh have a social registry system where the vulnerable population are already included in a list, and then that list is used when there are something bad happening, there are ways to get out of that. So this could be one area where the regional countries, they can share with each other, and Bangladesh has some good examples around that too. At the same time, we'll have to remind that digital solution is not the answer. It can create further digital divide too. So please remember that 51% of population still are out of internet coverage in Asia, South Asia. So there are challenges around that. So we need to remember that too. Fiscal space. Now, again in South Asia, the regions overall investment here in social protection is 4.5% of the GDP. In Bangladesh, it's actually 2.6%. So if investment are not made in social protection, then these vulnerabilities will not be overcome actually. So we need to really, if we are really serious about helping the climate vulnerable people, the people who are struggling with various fronts, we need to invest actually. That needs to be there. And finally, the regional cooperation needs to be there so we can learn from each other. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Anwar Bhai. I think you made lot of pertinent points. I will not try to summarize it all, but I really liked the fact that when we talk about finance, as you said, actually climate change is a cross-cutting issue. All finance, all financial investments, all regional finance that we bring in should be robust from the impacts of climate change. Similarly, when we're talking about a green transition, we spoke about renewable energy trade between countries such as Bhutan and Nepal, where we could benefit from a regional framework. And I guess the regional framework could lend its hand to a lot of other issues as well we can think of. Going forward, given the LDC graduation, the socioeconomic demography of Bangladesh is also going to look very different. So how do we then use social protection and complement it to also support the impacts of climate change, disasters, etc. So thank you very much for that. I would now like to go to Professor Asif Nazrul. So my question to you is, so delivering economic growth that eradicates poverty and is resilient to the impacts of climate change and also reduces greenhouse gas emissions is a key policy task for decision makers in Bangladesh and in South Asia. Post-COVID, like Anwar Bhai was talking about, how can we actually return to the growth rates of the past 2 decades and achieve low carbon climate resilient development without a renewed buildup of the macroeconomic vulnerabilities? And what are the kind of transboundary cooperation issues that we can actually gain help from? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the answer is already there in your question. We need a green, inclusive, and resilient growth and development. And this approach is actually accepted as a model for achieving the sustainable development goals and to address inequality, discrimination, and vulnerability of the marginalized population to environmental and technological changes. This approach has become much more relevant and important in the post-COVID and post-Ukraine war situation, because we all know that this crisis has actually widened the gap between developed country and developing country. And it has also widened the gap between the ruling class and ordinary people in particularly of the developing countries. So this model, I'm not a development expert, but all I know that this model has 4 fundamental components. You have to address the recovery issue. You have to tackle poverty. You have to ensure resilient growth. You have to promote human resource development, inclusive human resource development, and you have to accelerate green growth. We all know these objectives. And when we talk about achieving these objectives or framing policy or legal documents around these objectives, we know that there are a number of policy and legal documents in Bangladesh as well. We have the NDC document, we have the roadmap for NDC document, we have updated version of the NDC document in 2021. We have a number of environmental and development policy. We have policy on every segment of development and every segment of growth. We have number of laws, and we have NAPA document, we have NAMA document, we have climate change action plan, everything is there. When we talk about this policy, I think 2 fundamental features are there. We don't have any scarcity of document or policy statements or legislations. And we don't have any problem in asking for more financing. We always ask for more financing in terms of adaptation fund or in terms of funds through the loss and damage methodology and in terms of development partners assistance, no problem about that. But we talk less about actual implementation. If you look at the policy documents, they have very ambitious goals like inclusive development, like building resilience, like green development. No problem is there. But I have told you before the discussion, that we have never engaged ourselves in assessing the actual implementation or actual achievements. So this accounting of our actual achievement in terms of mitigation obligation, or adaptation to the climate change, or in terms of green growth, these are absolutely necessary. I think this process should be there. Unless this process is there, formulating policy document or participating in international conference or arranging very high profile seminars, it could produce actually little. So we have a very robust system of accounting and assessing our actual progress, learning lessons from our failure, learning lessons from the best practices from regions and neighboring country, and doing an honest assessment and realigning our development strategy in accordance with that assessment. That is my answer for the time being.
Thank you very much. And I guess what we can actually pull from there is the need for more robust and strenuous impact monitoring and evaluation frameworks that we can also learn from other countries in South Asia and what they're doing?
Exactly.
And how do we also more concretely assess the implementation and achievement, which there have been a lot as well, but how do we align it, like you said?
I mean, in order to do a honest assessment, you need a honest democracy. You need a accountable government. If you don't have a honest democracy, if you don't take people into cognizance, if you don't have any institutions of accountability, if all of your institutions of accountability, if they only serve the ruling government, not the people of the country, then you cannot do anything honestly, let alone the question of honest assessment. So I think this is absolutely necessary. When we talk measures to be done in this type of forums, we try to avoid these questions, but we should not. Because when you talk about inclusion, addressing discrimination, or addressing exclusion issue, addressing vulnerability issue, you must ensure that there is democracy in a country, actual democracy in a country. There are institutions in the country who are functioning and who are actually carrying out the democratic values of the government of the day. Because, I mean, I'm not a development expert, but I know a little bit about the environmental issues. If you look at the developed country and developing country, if you compare between them, if you compare between the countries which have democracy, functioning democracy, and which do not have functioning democracy, you will see that the countries which have functioning democracy, their environmental performance, their success in ensuring green and inclusive development is much more than the countries which do not have actual democracy, which do not have functioning democracy. Because democracy is not only about only voting, democracy is also about accountability, transparency, participation. So unless you ensure these things, if you avoid those things, I don't think we can make any significant progress in achieving the sustainable development goals and other things. The second thing is regional cooperation. This is absolutely necessary, but you know that our experience is very poor. Our experience is not something which we can boast of. You know that we have a regional cooperation framework, which is called SARC. And SARC, actually, it has very lofty ambitions. It talked about inclusive growth. It talks about improving the quality of life. It talked about disaster management, cooperation. It talked about green economy. Even if you look at that SARC charter, they also talk about environmental issues. It has also established, if I can remember, 5 centers. And one of those centers was disaster management. Another one was on health and agriculture. But if you look at their actual performance, I mean, it's something which cannot be actually stated very proudly. If you compare the performance of SARC to another neighboring regional organization, ASEAN, I give you just one data, that the intra-regional trade among the SARC countries is only 5% of their total trade. Compared to that, the inter-regional trade among the ASEAN countries is 25%, 5 times more. I have done a PhD on international river issue. I just compare these issues, if you look at the ASEAN countries, they have a very functioning river treaty regime, which is called Mekong River Treaty. And they mean the integrated basin-wide development. My friend from UNDP talked about exploring the benefit of excess power from Nepal for Bangladesh and for other countries. If you want to do that, you have to depend on hydroelectricity. You have to ensure integrated basin-wide management, development, and utilization of the international water courses, shared water courses. And you know that we have many, many shared water courses which sustain the life and livelihood of the people, billions of people, more than, I think, around 2 billion people of the region. But you will never find any integrated basin-wide approach in any of the river agreement in South Asia. All the agreements are talking about sharing of waters. It's like sharing a pizza between 2 persons. It doesn't even talk about the environmental flow, which is absolutely necessary to sustain the ecology or health of the river bed. It talks about that there are 10,000 cubic of water, India will take 5,000 cubic, Bangladesh will take 5,000 cubic. What will happen to the river? It doesn't even mention the word ecology or environment anywhere in the agreement. If you compare it to the ASEAN countries agreement, and if you compare it to even the African Zambezi River Treaty, Niger River Treaty, I mean, I don't find enough reason to be very optimistic. All I can say is that you need to really mean regional cooperation. You need to activate SARC. You need to take a lot of measures both domestically and regionally. That is more important.
Thank you. I was actually just going to come to this question, Professor Nazrul, that because you already talked about a lot of this good practices that we can learn from the ASEAN. So what do you think is would be an efficient way for us to actually collect, share, and use this evidence and knowledge on understanding how development policy responses are evolving to address these global impacts and opportunities? I mean, in a concrete way, what are the next steps? What can we do? Because referring to ASEAN.
We means people or government or regional organization.
Everyone, what can we do collectively? I think everything needs to be done, collectively in this kind of space.
If you want to collect data and information, if you want to learn from good practices, I mean, in this time of digitalization and online materials, it's not a problem at all. All you need to have a good intention. You need to have a very robust institutional framework for information exchange and learning experience from each other country. So the intention, goodwill is more important than like formulating very high profile and ambitious documents and talking big things. So in order to ensure that the government has goodwill, you need to ensure that the government is accountable to people. The government is transparent. So the core of the problem also lies in democratization process of these countries. Unless you have true democracy, if you compare Bangladesh to United Kingdom, everything they do, they need to be very much accountable to the people. If you look at the parliament there, the parliament is holding the executive accountable every time. And if you look at our parliament, have our parliament ever discussed about the NAPA document, or have it ever talked about our roadmap to achieve the nationally determined contribution? Have we ever talked about our environmental performance, our obligation under the Biodiversity Convention or Climate Change Convention? Have you ever talked about inclusive green growth in last 5 years or 10 years or 15 years? So the first thing, I think, if you have good intention, you can build good institutions. And good institution, if they want to learn from others, it's not a problem at all. There are enough materials, online materials to learn from others. There are many, many regional and global framework, even under the environmental treaties. If you look at Biodiversity Treaty, if you look at the Climate Change Convention, Ozone Depletion Convention, they have secretariat. They have a dedicated institution for exchange of information and helping countries to learn from other countries. So the intention, I would say, is more important.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we will go to our third panelist, and so we can open the floor soon. So Simon, with the increase of both slow and fast onset disaster events due to climate change, and we also recently went through the threats of the double hazards together, COVID and climate change, we have seen supply chain disruptions become more common, resulting in governments and businesses to rethink their long-term strategies. So what kind of approaches can the South Asian countries take to enhance the supply chain resilience and security, and also de-risk the global supply chain in the region? Thank you.
Thank you, Maliha. I would like to emphasize that, first of all, for supply chain, the same principles that are being applied in the private sector is the same thing that is supposed to be done within the public sector, the government. So as Professor Asif was saying, there's no transparency. In supply chain, if there's no transparency, you are going to lose. There's going to be a lot of distraction, because there should be transparency, there should be attempt to create competition among the suppliers who want to supply the staff. There should be fairness, and there should be value for money. Because if you buy this water outside, and let's say for 10 taka, but the government is buying it for 100 taka, why? So you see the problem. And at the end of the day, the poor people will suffer, because anytime there is a disruption in the supply chain, or there is no security or resilience in the supply chain, the poor people are the ones that suffer most, unfortunately. So in my view, I have some point that I think the South Asian region can adopt in order to strengthen the supply chain resilience and security. And the first one is the regional cooperation. Regional cooperation is very important. So, and as Professor Assad also mentioned, the SAR and the SAR is not working as expected. So I would suggest there should be an attempt to have an extended version of ASEAN by either merging the two together or trying to apply for extension like the way we have for the BRICS extension. This should be the first approach. And then in terms of the supply chain itself, if the government is having a very transparent system, and there's competition, there's value for money, there's fairness in selection of suppliers, they can have like more than one, like maybe probably about 3 suppliers for a particular item. So if you maybe medicine for a particular type of sickness, you need to have like kind of about 2 or 3 suppliers for that one, so that in case of failure from the other supplier, you can now, and all this should be within the region, because the region has the capacity. The region has the capacity in terms of the supply chain. You know, almost everything that is being supplied in the West or even in Africa, most things come from the region, the South Asian region. So the region has the capacity. I think that capacity just needs to be built and then improved upon by the stakeholders in the government. Also, the digital transformation is something we cannot run away from. So all this needs to be integrated in tracking the suppliers, try to know how the supply chain moves, where there will be a disruption in terms of where can we not track in terms of transparency. Because if you are having a very digital, transparent digital system, you can be able to track within the supply chain of the supplier, and also know whether, for instance, they are using child labor or not, and all that. You can, because you need to visit the supplier, you need to check their environment to see what they are, how they are producing the kind of item you are buying from them. Also, as I indicated earlier on, I believe the suppliers within the region capacity can be built and improved upon. And then we can also learn from regions like ASEAN, as I indicated. And then you can see that one thing that I'm emphasizing on the region is, for supply chain to move very well, we need free movement of goods and people. And if, so for instance, what we have in West Africa, 15 countries within West Africa, there's free movement of goods and people. You can go to any of those 15 countries without a visa, any day, anytime. And those people can come to your country without a visa. Either they are committing crimes, high crimes, whatever, you still have to respect the protocol. So I think this is what South Asian region need. You need to open up so that there should be a free movement of people, because someone from Thailand shouldn't get a visa before coming to Bangladesh, you know? So that is because we have that in West Africa. I go to all the 15 countries without a visa. So you must be able to expand that and strengthen the regional cooperation, so that will ensure that the supply chain is more resilient. You can move, trucks can move within the various countries without stoppage. I think that is all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And on the point of technologies.
Can I just add one thing to you? I mean, you were talking about visa. I was elected Bureau member of South Asian for Human Rights. And whenever we had meeting and we were talking about the venue of the next meeting, inevitably, we excluded Pakistan and India because Pakistanis will not give visa to India and Indian will not give visa to Pakistani. And nowadays, Bangladesh is also refusing visa from some other countries, and India is refusing visa for Bangladeshi people. It has become so frequent nowadays. So even with visa, we are failing to obtain visa for solid reason. Respectable people are being denied visa. So, I mean, you were talking about free movement. I just thought that I should mention my experience.
Thank you, Professor Asif. And you know, free movement then means you cannot have a
Sorry,
supply
I'll have
chain.
to interrupt because
Okay.
we want to finish in 2 minutes so we can go to questions from the
Okay, thank you.
audience. So just on the kind of technologies front, or what emerging or digital technologies do you think that we can kind of globally are used in these supply chains that we could also inherit and use in this region? Do you have any good practices or good examples that you might like to share? Thank you.
Yeah. So for emerging technologies. So, I'm sorry. Yeah. For emerging technologies, I think AI is something we cannot run away from, but the UN has even raised an alarm about it, that it must be regulated. It must be regulated, and so I really believe that the region must ensure there is a strict regulation of emerging technologies such as AIs, and through laws and regulatory processes, so that issues of privacy and personal information cannot be abused. And also there should be, sometimes when you make the rules and the laws, you may not know that these are best practice or not. So there should be a review of those rules regularly, probably maybe every quarter, to see whether really are we on the right track or not. If not, what can we do to improve? Because they should be able to ensure that there's an accountability, as Professor Asif also said, and that accountability will ensure that there is a peer reviews and constructive feedback system where people can freely say, oh, this is not working, I think we should do this, we should do that, and all that. So basically, it all boils down to regulation and then...
But can you give a good example, a good practice that we could be integrating?
Okay,
A
so
specific example, yeah.
So first of all, now is the European Union has come out with a law to regulate the AI. So, as Professor Asif said, now the world is very global. You don't need to reinvent the wheel again. Just check what they have and modify it to your region. Then that's all. Because I don't know. Now in our age, information should be more accessible, and then learning from the best practice shouldn't be difficult. But I can tell you, European Union has a law regulation on the AI.
Thank you very much. I want to now open the floor because we have 15 more minutes for any questions from the... Yes, please. If you can also introduce yourself and then ask your question, please. Very briefly, because we have less than 15 minutes to finish this line.
Peace be upon you. This is Mehdi Hassan from Dhaka University Debating Society. Actually, my question is to Asif Nazrul sir. Sir has already mentioned that the world should actually ensure the honest democracy as a condition of resilient and inclusive development or growth. Then my question is here, honest democracy is almost an utopian concept. We cannot ensure this wholly. And secondly, there are some countries who have hardly democracy, like the China or the other countries. Then how we can ensure inclusive or sustainable growth for these countries who haven't enough democracy or have hardly any kind of democracy? What's your opinion in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you. If there are any other questions, we can take 3 and then... Yes, please.
Well, my name is Dr. K.M. Kofi Islam, and I am a civil servant. I have 2 questions to Mr. Haq, the representative from UNDP. One is on social protection fund. victims of climate change, and another one on inequality. Actually, currently I have been pursuing a research program on social protection for victims of climate change. And I visited Koira Upazila of Khulna district and Shamnagar Upazila of Shakira district first week of August. And I have seen hundreds of families are still living in the embankments, and it shows like slums. They are the victims of Cedar, super cyclone Cedar and Ayla. So long, 15, 16 years gone, but still they are living over there. So my question is, what can be done for them, and what you can do on behalf of UNDP for them? This is number one question. Number two is, we are talking about inclusive growth, and Asif Nazrul sir said that lot of policies are there, but 2016 household income and expenditure survey done by BBS shows that the Gini coefficient was 0.48, but in 2021 it is 0.499. So it's gone up. The inequality is going up. So what is the implications of these policies, and what should we do now to
Thank
stop
you.
this?
Thank you. Okay, one more question there and then one here, but please keep it very, very brief.
Thank you. My question is to Simon. I'm Rezai from ISEC in Bangladesh. So I just love his example for visa-free movement in Africa. Though Africa is world most dangerous continent right now, we believe that. So my question is I'm working on ISEC and we do exchange. We are present in 127 countries in this world. Just to exchange each other countries, then we can make, we can build pitch. So how come it's possible that in Asia or for SAARC to implement to visa-free country for at least SAARC countries or entire Asia as Africa or Schengen countries or European Union? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the mic here?
Thank you. I'm Majibin Khaled, Chairman, Khaled Musharraf Foundation. My question is to Professor Asif. Actually, you talked about regional cooperation, but when we talk about SAARC, it's dead. So what can be the alternative? So whenever we are talking about it, we want to make SAARC alive again, but it's not possible. You know that, and we all know that. Pakistan and India issues are there. So, but in Africa, we see 15 countries. They're moving. They're migrating from one place to another place. So, what can be the alternative, according to you? Thank you.
Thank you. And one last question at the back, please.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Good morning, and my name is Musuma. I just wanted to ask, and I've been passionate about this subject, and especially regarding education. I feel quite privileged that I did have a good education, and definitely my friends also do. And I am aware of the fact that we belong in a particularly financially advanced sector of the country. My friend, for instance, who teaches at Australian International School, I see that their school service is really, really good, and the fees for that school is also not for regular children. I'm also in the law field. I'm a lawyer, and I get very passionate about seeing children who are sleeping on the streets, or they're just, working as a child. And I know that education is a fundamental right, and it's also free for them. But I still see that there is a huge disparity between these two sections of our country, and I'm really passionate to work for this. So I wanted to ask the esteemed panel maybe what you can advise on how a country can grow in terms of the education field and help, affect this this issue, because education is the key in ultimately developing a country, and if we want good leaders, we need them to be educated. We need them to understand what democracy means. Thank you.
Thank you. Anwar Bhai, we start with you. Maybe you can also take this question.
Okay, so in relation to social protection, you need to, I'm sure that you all are aware that the way the social protection evolved in Bangladesh is more around disaster management. So there are hundreds of programs right now happening, and many of these are also like with a specific objective to really manage a crisis. And 2015, for the first time, Bangladesh basically drafted the National Social Security Strategy with an aim that to really streamline and thinking about a life cycle approach, understanding the vulnerabilities of a person's life, and then design bigger programs. Still a long way to go. Now, coming back to you around Koira and Satkira, the struggle that the communities are having, I think this is a live discussion that we are having, and that's what we are trying to say also, that we need to really understand the climate hotspots and really understand what are the vulnerabilities there, and is the existing social protection program enough for them? In my opinion, it's not, because the vulnerabilities are quite different and this needs to be addressed differently. In UNDP, we help to do a mapping. We call it Climate Vulnerability Index, actually. There is a map, actually, that shows where are the vulnerabilities, climate vulnerabilities happening. We superimpose that map in the poverty map. So there are correlations, but you know that the way social protection work happening, it's more around a centralized decision-making process that, okay, each in Upojila, there will be allocation, and it's not really, right now, it's not like that, okay, what are the demands at the local level and then catering the schemes around that. That's not happening. So we need to improve around that. So that's why we're talking about like the more of a kind of adaptive shock responsive social protection, where we need to go now from a kind of more of a, okay, disaster happens, then we respond. So I discussed this earlier. So what UNDP is doing, we have project, we call it Logic. We have also GCF project happening in that area, really trying to work with the communities through a locally led adaptation, engaging local government into the process, and then basically learning from there, because you know UNDP works with the government. So it's actually a government project, actually, trying to really help government to learn from, a project cannot cover everything, but at least that learning, how that learning can influence the policy, we're trying to work around that. And we also have a project with the cabinet division that are really helping to implement the national social security strategy that I mentioned. So again, we need to really think about the life cycle approach. That should cover your question from the back around if street children are vulnerable and they are not having their education. So that should be identified as an area, actually, and then government should intervene with their social protection support here. So if the child labor is reality, child labor should not happen, but if it is a reality, then what can be done so that these children also go to the school? So there are ways to work around various things. So I think it's still a long way to go, and as I mentioned, that investment needs to be there, because when we go to finance division saying that, okay, why investment are not being made, then they refer to like until and unless the tax GDP ratio improves, it's very difficult to increase the money for social protection. So there are always debates like that happening. So we need to resolve all those kind of things to take this discussion forward.
Thank you, Anwar Bhai. Simon, I think you have only one question, so if you could kindly take 1 minute, because
Yeah.
we're very, almost
Thank you.
at the end.
So how can we implement a visa-free? It's need a political will and commitment from the various government. And I think someone mentioned that Pakistan and India are not willing to cooperate. So you can leave them two out for now. And those governments that are willing to cooperate, you can have that one as a start. Or then if they see that those ones are working, they'll probably join. but all need a political will and a commitment for the various countries to say, okay, we, South Asia, we want to forego the visa-free, we want to forego the visa restrictions and allow our citizens to move within the region free. At least you did that one.
Thank you. And I'll now go to Professor Asif Nazrul. We
I
have 2 minutes. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Because I have 2 questions. The thing is that there cannot be any perfect democracy, but you can measure a democracy through some lenses. For example, whether the election is free and fair, whether the parliament is functioning, meaning whether they are holding the executive accountable. Third is whether your local government is powerful and independent. Fourth is whether your judiciary is independent. Okay, so there are many studies based on these criteria on the democratic performance of a government. My point is, if a country is more democratic, it's more likely that it will undertake a inclusive, green and resilient growth policy. That is my point. Coming back to the second question, what can be our alternative since SARC is dead? The alternative is actually rejuvenating the SARC again. It cannot be possible, but of course there are some practical alternatives. Number one is Bangladesh can try to form different type of regional organization, excluding India and Pakistan, involving, for example, there are many other countries. Even Bangladesh can invite Thailand as well. It's not a problem. Thailand is an ASEAN country. They can try. Don't forget that Bangladesh took the initiative of forming SARC. Second initiative is Bangladesh and some other countries can apply for expansion of ASEAN and try to get a membership there, at least as an observer. The third one is more practical. You know that I'm giving you one example. Bangladesh as a country can learn from other country by being part of other regional organization. For example, there is a 1992 UNEC convention, United Nations Economic Commission for Europe convention, that is absolutely on shared watercourses and shared lakes. So it has opened for global signature, global participation in 2014. It means that although Bangladesh is in South Asia, Bangladesh can become a party to that convention and to learn from the institutions built under that convention and to get technological and technical help from them and to benefit themselves from exchange of information with all the state parties to that convention. Our policymakers actually do not think about those options and opportunities. I think we need, if we really want to get benefit from regional organization or global organization, if you sincerely try, it's not something very difficult. You can always do it.
Thank you very much to my very esteemed panel for that wonderful discussion. So with that, I would like to close the discussion for today. Thank you.
Thank you.